It's 2 in the afternoon. Your to-do list has exactly one item on it. Reply to an email. That's it. That's the whole task. And yet you have been sitting on your bed for 3 hours, phone in hand, scrolling nothing in particular, feeling a low hum of dread every time your eyes drift toward your laptop. You are not tired. You slept fine. You are not sick. You just cannot make your body walk to the desk. Meanwhile, at 2 in the morning last night, you built an entire imaginary business plan in your head, complete with a name, a logo concept, and a 5-year vision, purely for fun, purely because your brain wanted to. If that sounds familiar, you already know the verdict everyone around you has quietly reached: lazy. Maybe you've even said it about yourself, in that flat, tired voice reserved for insults you've stopped bothering to argue with. You've built a whole identity around being someone who dreams big and does nothing. Someone who is, in your own words, a trauma response with a LinkedIn profile. Ambitious on paper, paralyzed in practice. But here's the question nobody asks you. What if that word is simply wrong? What if the thing you've been calling laziness was never a character flaw at all, but a signal, a precise, intelligent, oddly protective signal from a nervous system that is trying to keep you functioning inside a world that was never built for how your mind actually works? Today, we're taking that signal apart, piece by piece, and showing you why the very thing you've been ashamed of might be the clearest evidence yet that you're wired for something the world hasn't caught up to. Let's start with the plate you keep being handed. Psychology has a concept called need-for-cognition, a measurable hunger some brains have for depth, complexity, and meaning. If you're one of them, mundane tasks don't just bore you, they actively repel you. Filling out a form, running an errand, answering a routine message, these things generate zero dopamine for a brain like yours, and your system has learned to treat zero reward as not worth the energy, so your brain quietly refuses, not out of defiance, out of starvation. You can spend an entire evening falling down a research rabbit hole on a topic that genuinely interests you, absorbing more in those hours than most people absorb in a month, and still be completely unable to send one 2-line email. That's not a discipline problem. That's a brain that has decided the email doesn't feel real, and it will not perform for something that lacks substance. You're not lazy. You're a depth seeker stuck in a shallow task world, and the moment you find the thing that actually has weight to it, your output stops looking ordinary and starts looking rare. Then there's the nervous system itself and how much it's actually carrying. If you've ever been called too sensitive or too observant, there's a real mechanism behind that. Some people experience the world at a genuinely higher resolution, catching the tiny shift in someone's tone, the flicker of tension in a room, the small warning sign everyone else walks past. Psychologists sometimes call the drive behind this environmental mastery, a deep need to manage your surroundings just to feel okay inside them. Running that kind of perceptual engine all day is exhausting in a way that doesn't show up on a step counter. So when you finally get a quiet afternoon, your body doesn't ask for productivity. It asks for nothing. Total, motionless nothing. Especially if you were the kid who grew up fast. The one who took care of things before you were old enough to. The one for whom rest never quite felt safe to have. For that version of you, adult stillness isn't avoidance. It's the first time your body has felt permitted to stop performing. What looks like laziness might actually be a debt of rest finally getting collected, decades late. There's also the matter of the picture in your head. You know the one, the polished, complete, almost cinematic version of the project, the version where every piece fits and nothing is awkward or half-formed. The problem is that reality never arrives looking like that, and the gap between the vision and the mess of an actual first draft can feel less like inconvenience and more like injury. Researchers describe something called foreboding joy, a tendency, especially common in people high in openness and a certain kind of emotional intensity, to flinch away from good things before they happen, just in case they don't. You're not lying on the couch because you don't care about the work. You're there because you care so much that starting feels like risking the one thing you can't stand to lose. The fantasy where it's already perfect, That's not laziness. That's a creative standard so high it occasionally jams the machine. What you need isn't more motivation. You need a system that lets you move an idea off the shelf in its rough, embarrassing, unfinished form, because a finished thing that exists will always beat a perfect thing that doesn't. Then there's your clock. The actual biological one, not the one on the wall. Some people are built to run on a schedule that has nothing to do with sunrise. Research has repeatedly linked a genuine nocturnal preference with higher verbal intelligence, and there's a reasonable evolutionary story behind it. The ability to override your circadian rhythm for an abstract, self-chosen reason. Because you wanted to think, not because a threat demanded it. Is itself a fairly sophisticated cognitive move. If your best ideas arrive at an hour most people are asleep, and your brain feels like wet cement by 9 in the morning, that's not a discipline failure. That's hardware. You are quite literally trying to operate inside a schedule your biology never agreed to, and every morning you spend guilty about waking up late after a genuinely productive night is a morning spent apologizing for your own wiring. The tiredness you feel before noon isn't laziness. It's recovery time from a mind that was working while everyone else was resting. There's a pattern too in the things you start and quietly walk away from. A hobby you were obsessed with for 2 months and then never touched again. A subject you devoured every book on, and then abandoned the second you understood it. To a specialist, that looks like a lack of grit, but there's another way to read it. As a form of serial mastery. Once you've absorbed the core of a skill, the part that genuinely satisfies your curiosity, your interest naturally moves on. And in a world where the rules of any given field keep shifting under everyone's feet, the ability to pivot between domains, to carry insight from one place into a completely unrelated one, is not a weakness at all. It's how bridges get built between fields that would otherwise never talk to each other. What looks like a scattered, unfinished history is actually a library. A private collection of metaphors and half-understood systems that, one day, will let you see a connection nobody trained in a single lane could ever spot. You're not quitting. You're graduating, over and over, into the next thing that will eventually make you useful in a way no specialist can be. And finally, there's the hours you lose to your own head, replaying a conversation for the 4th time, rehearsing what you should have said, running an entire imagined scene of a future that hasn't happened yet. It feels like waste. It feels like the most embarrassing kind of laziness, because at least scrolling your phone looks like doing something. But that inner rehearsal is your brain's default mode network, doing real work, searching for emotional resolution, practicing a version of yourself that feels safer, more articulate, more in control than the one who actually has to show up in real rooms. People who do this heavily often score high on a trait called absorption, which is also strongly linked to deep focus and creative thinking. You're not avoiding your life. You built a private room where you could feel things fully, on your own terms, because the volume of what you feel needed somewhere to go. The goal was never to stop imagining. It's to notice that the person who eventually walks out of that room tired, unpolished, imperfect was always going to be enough, exactly as they are. So, if you've spent years feeling like a contradiction, ambitious in your head, stalled in your body, brilliant in flashes, and then completely unreachable, take a breath. Because none of this was ever a character defect. It was a nervous system finding the exact configuration it needed to survive an overload nobody else could see. You are not failing to be a productivity machine. You were never supposed to be one. The world has spent a long time rewarding the specialist, the early riser, the person who can grind through anything without asking why. But the next chapter belongs to the people who see across boundaries instead of staying in one lane, who think in the quiet hours instead of the loud ones, who feel everything at a resolution most people never notice. So stop rewinding through every moment you thought you failed, and start looking at that same footage differently, because the thing you've been calling your weakness might be exactly the strength the world hasn't figured out how to reward yet. If this finally put language to a feeling you've been carrying around without a name for it, go ahead and hit subscribe.